Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I am your host, Chris Gargano, and for episode 100, that's right. And for that, we thank you very much for being part of the show since day one, whether listening or watching on our YouTube channel. You know we appreciate it. Our guest for episode 100, the former senior vice president and general manager of the San Francisco Giants, Bobby Evans. Bobby and I worked together at the Giants for a number of seasons, and we will talk about his career in baseball. He interned with the Boston Red Sox, worked in the commissioner's office at Major League Baseball, and then started with the Giants in 1994. What did he learn throughout his journey? He will explain from mentors like Bob Quinn, Dick Tidrow, and of course, Brian Sabean. We go into detail with their relationship and the leadership principles that Bobby learned from Brian, as well as conversations Bobby had with Steve Kerr. He'll reference author Pat Lencioni, a Bay Area native who writes and talks about leadership. A fascinating conversation. We explore analytics versus intuition, Bobby's relationship with the players throughout the many years, and the reunion of the 2014 San Francisco Giants. This conversation was taped in late September, well before the Buster Posey news came down. Buster, of course, the president of baseball operations for the Giants now, and Buster comes up within the conversation organically. Currently, Bobby is the CEO at a company called Home Preservation in the Bay Area, a licensing contractor company. This is a fascinating conversation. It begins now with Bobby Evans on Keep the Line Moving. All right, look who it is, everybody. Bobby Evans. Technically, my former colleague. Even though I wasn't on the baseball side, I still feel like we were in this together, Bobby, and it was very fun working with you.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun together, Chris. I mean, your team, I love watching people put together their team, and you put together a great team, around the ballpark to keep the fans entertained. And, I think we learned a lot from each other in different ways. And when we win those World Series, we do it together. I mean, everybody plays a role from the bat boy to the guys in the middle of the lineup, to the guys pitching in the last part of the game, to those of us in the front office, and whether it be the baseball side or the business side or the entertainment side. And that's the fun of it, is winning those things together. And you see all the different parts come together, and no one part without it would the machine wouldn't run. I mean, the whole thing wouldn't operate correctly, and it would affect the results. And so it's fun to do it together. I mean, that's really the best part.
It really is, Bobby, and so well put. So, Bobby, when you look back and reflect on your time at the Giants, what comes to mind? What's the first thing?
No, it's just great people. I mean, I think that we had a great visionary in Brian Sabean, who lived, not he didn't only know the game, he loved the game, he believed in the game, and he lived the game. And every pitch, every out, every inning, every game meant something. I think we all learned under the greatness of what Brian Sabean expected, and what he dreamed we could be if we did everything we could do. And I think he drove us to be the best version of ourselves, whether that's in the front office, or the medical team, or the team itself, the coaches, the player development people, the scouts. And at the same time, he gave us rope to be who we are, and he gave us rope to do it the way we wanted to do it. But he demanded the results to be what he expected. And I think it drove us all to be a bond internally, but also it was always about people. And Brian was a people person. He wanted to have the right people around him, but he also wanted to make sure we had the right people around us in each of our given areas. And I think that was, what brings back such great memories, is just the great people. I mean, we're back to the 2014 reunion recently, and it's just, seeing scouts, and seeing our player development director, and seeing, just members of the front office. But then, of course, all the great players that played small roles on that 2014 team, and players that pitched the last 5 innings of Game 7, in Madison Bumgarner. I mean, the people are what the organization is about. And when you say forever Giant, there's a forever bond because of the people.
That's exactly right. I feel the same way about the organization. And when you think back about it, one's legacy, and you think back, it's all about the people, right, that you influenced. And you just touched beautifully there on Brian Sabian's legacy. So, my question was, when you said that everyone was involved and he wanted everyone to be the best versions of themselves, how did he do that, Bobby? Was it a series of meetings? Was it like one on one interactions? Was it all of the above? How did he get everyone to row in the same direction?
I think a lot of it was empowering people. I mean, he would instruct, he would direct, he would guide, he would even, have a top-down approach at times, but he also empowered people to do their job. And he knew when to stay back and let you operate, and he also knew when to be very involved and not to let you get too far off course. And I think that was, from the players to the manager to the medical to the front office, baseball ops, even around the organization and his coordination with Larry about other aspects of the organization. I just feel like that he set very clear expectations, but then he gave you rope to do it the way that worked best for you. But ultimately, you are held accountable for your results.
And organization wins, Bobby, right? Well, you just alluded to it right there. When the front office, the business side is integrated with baseball, in this case with the Giants, or football in my previous stops, or basketball, whatever the case may be, that integration takes place and then magic can happen. Did
Yeah.
you see that evolving as the younger players, Pablo Sandoval, Tim Lincecum, Matt Cain, started to come up? The baseball was flourishing and the business was supporting it as well. So there was a synergy going on that really proved itself in 10, 12, and 14.
Yeah, I think the business side and baseball side were very well blended together, with Brian's leadership, Larry's leadership, and our collaboration. I mean, there was a desire to see each side of this succeed, and we knew when the business side's succeeding, it also helps on the baseball side. Well, obviously, when the baseball side's succeeding, it helps on the business side, and we saw them as really one. And I think we saw the effort to do things the right way. I think the right way by our fans, but the right way by our players and the right way by our front office. And I think it built a culture. I think that where people were proud of the organization they worked for, and obviously very proud of the results, not just on the years we won championships, but also on the years where we continued to have sellouts, where the years we continued to celebrate the giants of the past. I mean, one of the things that Peter McGowan emphasized from the day one when he bought the club was how important the players of the past were to the organization and how he brought them back. And that's even continued to this day, because all that we accomplished in I think our 25 plus years, we look at it as we accomplished it on the shoulders of the players and front offices of the past and ownership groups of the past. And we continue to celebrate that with the Wall of Fame and other ways. And I think that recognizing how you got where you are and how we got to where we ended up with those championships, we recognize it wasn't just us. It was obviously on the shoulders of Bob Quinn and many other executives along the way that helped all of us be who we are in the moment. So
And you alluded to Peter McGowan, who, along with Larry and others, saved the team from moving to Florida, right, in the early 90s, which was paramount and allowed the San Francisco Giants tradition and legacy to continue. You also mentioned something that I didn't want to brush over was the reunion this past summer of the 2014 championship team. You were there, Mad Bum was there, all the representatives were there. What was that like emotionally walking into the ballpark to celebrate that great team?
it was just a warm embrace. What I enjoyed the most was just seeing the players reconnect. I mean, we obviously missed Bruce Bochy being there because he was such an integral part, but it was fun to see the coaches and the players in their embrace of each other. It was just like they hadn't missed a beat in 10 years. It was fun to see the laughter and the joy and the excitement. I mean, one of the funnest stories for me, just in one brief moment during the visit, was, I was teasing Joe Panic about how Jeremy Affeldt, always emphasized what important role that Jeremy played in that double play in Game 7. Panic to Crawford to Belt, and Joe's like, absolutely. There's no way we would have turned that double play if that guy hadn't crushed it off of Jeremy Affeldt. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had time to turn that double play. So they love jabbing each other, and they have fun, and it was fun seeing them together.
So, Bobby, let's go back now. Growing up in Boston, like in all those teams and being, immersed in the greater New England area sports teams. If you were to tell that version of yourself, you're going to celebrate 3 world championships, you're going to become a Major League Baseball general manager, you're going to spend 25 years, at this fantastic organization, you're going to work your way up. You started in the commissioner's office at Major League Baseball. What do you think that 8-year-old would have said?
Well, it's funny. I mean, that was my prayer as a little boy was to have a career in baseball. But I always joke and say I should have prayed more specifically because I envisioned myself, in the middle of the lineup and catching behind the plate. I was a catcher growing up, and so I always joke that I should have prayed a little bit more specifically. But I couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity. And as a kid, I mean, you dream of playing the game, and then when I had an opportunity to intern with the Red Sox, it kind of opened my eyes. I was 20 years old. I'm interning with the Red Sox in Boston, and I was like, well, I guess there's other pathways, other than being a player. At that point, I had not made my college baseball team, so my opportunity was clearly diminishing to play. So just the fact that there was an opportunity in the front office. I mean, there's Lou Gorman, former major league manager, current scouting director at the time, Eddie Casco, and Eddie Kinney Sr., Eddie Kinney Jr., and Dick Bresciani with the Red Sox. All those people were influential. Linda Ezel and even Gene Yawkey at the time. I mean, it was very influential for me to see, wow, there's something beyond being on the field. And so, yeah, when you look back and those championships and those years with the Giants organization and almost 30 years in baseball overall, yeah, I think that 8-year-old would have been high-fiving me. Yeah, I think he would be high-fiving me. Pretty good.
So you just brought up something really interesting. And Bobby, throughout this podcast, which is approaching 2 years that I've been doing this, I have these rich conversations with people from all over different industries, mainly sports, but educators, authors, CEOs, presidents of different industries. And we get really nitty gritty into leadership, which I know that's something you're equally as passionate about, right? And I've heard interviews with you. I've done interviews with you. And one of the reasons I would always want to talk to you, Brian Boach, and Larry so much was the way you thought and the way you brought people together and understood. To be competitive is great, but you have to understand the whole person. You have to make sure that the athletes are taken care of and the organization is well-rounded. So back when you did, intern with the Red Sox at the 20-year-old version of yourself, did you start to see that? Did you start to see the reason I'm attracted to working perhaps in the front office is it's so complicated, but it's all about people and the way they deal with one another. And at 20, I didn't know that, but did you start to see that's something that interests me?
Yeah, I think I learned a lot about leadership from years serving on our leadership board at church, and in many ways, I learned very quickly that there's only one type of leadership. It's servant leadership, where you serve others as a leader. It's not top down. It's supporting from the ground up, and helping see people achieve great things. And it's not about getting the credit yourself. It's about putting people in a position where they have success, and ultimately the greater good for the organization or company, or in many cases for me, the church as well. And so, yeah, I think I was learning about leadership at 20, learning a lot in college, and providing leadership roles on campus. But I think in baseball, I felt like I came in as really someone who had to learn, from the ground up. I mean, I was 22 years old when I started in the commissioner's office. I had just turned 25 years old when I walked in the doors at Candlestick, and began working with Tony Siegel and Brian Sabian and Bob Quinn and Jack Hyatt, and a year or two later, Dick Tidrow, and all of those voices, people with experience, and then years later, Ned Coletti too, just really brought an abundance of guidance for me, in terms of how to be a part of the game. So I wasn't early on thinking about leadership in the game. I was just trying to make sure I could survive and contribute, because it's a fast moving train. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of players, a lot of people, a lot of coaches, scouts that are trying to influence direction and success. And I just wanted to make sure I played a role. So I played just whatever supporting role I could play, as much as I could play it, and began to see, areas where there were needs, in the organization where balls may get dropped or where something may not get done, and I could make sure it got done in the right way and in a way that made the organization proud, but ultimately made the players and coaches and scouts and front office feel, connected to what we were doing. And I feel like that a lot of that's because, Brian empowered me to do that. Dick Tidrow, Jack Hyatt, all of them influenced me. So when I began to look at myself more as a leader, I think was probably, several years into my time with the Giants before I realized that I was not just supporting, I was actually providing, clear leadership.
And were those direct mentor mentee relationships, Bobby, or were you just like you would go into their office, to Quinn's office or Dick Tidrow's office, or was it just by observation, a combination of the both? Because there's a lot of college students, right, or recent grads that listen to the podcast, and they're going to want to know how to navigate, seeing these established professionals and how to relate to them to glean as much information as you can.
Yeah, not formal at all. It was living in the day-to-day grind. It was being at the ballpark early and being there late and everything in between. And it was being available for me 24/7, even pre-cell phone and post-cell phone. I remember my memo to Bob Quinn asking if I could get a cell phone. This is like 1995 or 96, asking if I could get a cell phone and so I could be more available. But it was being available, it's just being in the room, in the conversation and listening and not interjecting, not trying to interject or interrupt, but it was observing, listening, and then side conversations after, sitting and watching inning after inning and ball game after ball game, with Brian Sabian and Dick Tidrow and Ned Colletti and Tony Siegel and just our team and just you watch and you learn and you listen, and then sitting in meetings with our managers, whether that was Dusty Baker or Felipe Alou or Bruce Bochy. I mean, and you're just around it, and you live it, and you make yourself available to support it, and understand your place, understand your role, and understand the roles of others around you, and you just become a sponge. And I think that's really a lot of how I learned, is just being a sponge.
And that's so valuable for folks listening and anyone, right, in any endeavor. So you look, Bobby, as you start to navigate and progress in your career, then you start to deal with players, right? So now you're interacting with the players. Talk about that relationship, and that's a different relationship because some you have to give very difficult news to and some you're nurturing and hoping for the best with potential, and then you have stars. So the different categories of players, how did you, in a general sense, because I know we're specific human beings, in a general sense, how would you approach early on those relationships with the players?
Well, I was on the front lines of working with players just because, I was at the time being an assistant in player development. I'm handing out meal money, I'm arranging hotels, I'm arranging travel, and I became available for those guys, whatever may come up. Every day with them in spring training, there's relationships built, there's trust built. I would always, as I evolved over time and became, more of a go-to person for players, I really wanted them to understand the chain of command. I mean, if you have an issue, your first point of contact is, go to your hitting coach or go to your manager or go to your pitching coach. Or if it's medical, of course, go to your trainer. But us in the front office, we want to be available if for some reason there's a break in the chain. But we try to point them towards a pathway so that our communication internally as an organization is working. And when players are frustrated, we wanted to make sure they had more information than they needed, not less information than they needed. And so we didn't want them to be in the dark about where they stood. We knew that they're making life decisions, living on small minor league player budgets. We wanted to make sure they knew what their pathway was, what their options were, what their potential was, and but we also own decisions. So when our player development director, made a decision to release a player, I would make sure and as often as I could, and I can't say I was 100% with this, as often as I could, no matter what role I had in the organization, I always tried to reach out, after the fact, or at least let players know that we cared and that, if you need anything, text me, call me. And I still have players that we released years ago that'll text me even now with things that they're looking at doing or wanting to do. And but part of it is just because I think we are people first. We ultimately we care about our guys. We believe in our guys, and at the same time, we're not just there for them when they're having success. We also want to be there for them when they're not and when they're actually moving on to something else.
And there's an art form to that, Bobby. You really put together what it looks like to have an over communication style organization, right? That brings everyone together and over communicates so the players know what's going on. Therefore, as you said, the chain of command, right? If the hitting instructor is not available, well, where do you go? Who can you talk to? And there's always somebody available. In fact, I pulled a quote that you said, and if you didn't say it, correct me, but here's what it is. It's a people business that uses numbers, not a numbers business that uses people. And
Yeah,
that was somewhat referencing to analytics and such, but I think it applies to what you just said. It's people first. And then you said the magic word, which is caring, right? And if you care for the individual and servant leadership, you can accomplish a lot, and it's not in the public eye, right? Why are the Giants successful? Well, they have all this talent on the field. Okay. But it's also what you're saying, the way they communicate, the way they operate, the way they influence players and have them say, hey, Bobby Evans was good to me, even though I'm no longer with the organization. That has value. Tell me about that, and tell
right,
me
right.
where you derived that very well put thought.
Well, I mean, there's people that are in the game today, and I hear whether it's from agents or players or front office folks, and articles I read and quotes I see from sometimes fans or beat writers or websites, and it just seems like there's some confusion a little bit about how much the numbers are are valued or weighed, and I think that we if we just had numbers, we would have no product, right? We'd have no product if we just did it. We need the players who are those are the people behind those numbers, and I think I just learned a lot from Brian over the years that he never wanted what we were doing number wise or analytically to override ultimately the execution on the field, which required the players. And so I think every one of those championship teams were it was very particular and important for Brian to make sure that the players were the ones getting the credit and not those of us in the front office who were making decisions based on whether it be scouting reports or analytical uh, um, elements of any one player's game. And I think that same thing with the lineup. Brian always wanted to empower the manager. He's the manager. He makes out the lineup. Hey, we can give Boach ideas or even suggestions to what the lineup could look like in any given day based on some analytic elements or some physical elements from our medical staff. But ultimately, Boach needed to own that lineup every day, and I think that was very important part of our success. And I think that's why I wanted to make sure and emphasize this is a people business. So
It is, absolutely. And you look at today's game, because I obviously wanted to talk to you about that. You look at today's game and how, the rule changes, right? There's been a series of events over the last few years that has changed the way you look at a game, the clock and the shifts and things of that nature. What, in a general sense, do you think of today's game?
I love watching the game. I actually like the pitch clock because it's sped up the game. I remember talking with even Buster Posey one time recently, where he said that the pitch clock, I guess last year, he can be watching a game and realize that he missed a pitch because the rhythm is different, and it
Mhm.
is, and you can't look away for very long because you miss two pitches, and so. I've enjoyed that. I love seeing the element of players running the bases more this year. I think that was starting to fall off a bit, and I'm glad to see it back. I can't believe the velocities we're seeing from the mound. I think that Brian Wilson used to joke one day he'd throw 105 or maybe he said 110, and I think if he was pitching today he probably would be because the information that these players have now about how to hold the ball and their arm angles and the biometric information as well as the strength that these players have that we're seeing 105-mile-an-hour fastball this season. I can't quite make sense of it, but the hitters have a huge challenge up there. I love the characters of the game that we see. I mean, it's hard to see any Dodger players have success, but there's one that's done pretty doggone well this year, and he's become really the face of the game. And it's great to see the extra playoff spots. I think it keeps fans engaged. It keeps cities involved and engaged. They have a chance, and I think that we have the best baseball ahead of us. So
You know what? I agree with you. And I didn't think I was going to like the rule changes. I didn't think I was going to like the clock, but I love it. You also alluded to Buster Posey, who now has a different seat, right? He was behind the plate all those years, and now he's in the ownership group and he has a lot of influence. And obviously, at the time of our taping, the Giants were eliminated from the postseason in 2024. But tell me about your thoughts about Buster. I bet you're not surprised at the leadership he is displaying.
I hate to sound overstated, but I just feel like it's a mark of brilliance for the organization, for Buster, for his former agent, for Larry Bear and our ownership group to bring him in as they did. I mean, because in so many ways, as much as what we accomplished on the field, he was such a big part of that, but also the culture that we built in the clubhouse. He was a huge part of that, and his just level of intellect just brings a lot to the game, as a player. So I can't imagine how much more fun and greater it is for him to be able to use that elements of intelligence and expertise and now experience, for years on the field with this organization, to be able to take that into an owners meeting and to take that into the executive level of the front office. It's really it's just so it's just such a great story. It's really, I think it's much better, I think, even than Derek Jeter's story, where Derek, because he went to the Marlins in a leadership role. I think Buster, just like we brought him up to the big leagues, we brought him up and we started him at first base hitting maybe sixth or something. And before, a month or two in, we knew we could trade Molina and put him as the everyday guy behind the plate. We moved him into the middle of the order, and off he went. And I think it's just a great way to get him back involved in the organization, owning part of it, having a relationship with the front office, the ownership, the executive team. I think it's just a great story, and I think it's great for Giant fans to know that Buster's, involved and still passionately following the game. I know that as a grown up watching the Celtics and seeing Larry Bird, work for the Indiana Pacers for all these years. I know he's from Indiana, but I just think it's great when your players work for your organization, and I think that's very special.
I agree with you. Yes, and the logic that he brings, he's a very thoughtful individual, right? And he's going to think of everything from both sides, from all sides, I should say. Bobby, over your shoulder, for those folks watching on our YouTube channel, there's a diagram there. And yes, I'm not going to ask you because you've already told me that's a leadership diagram. What is that, Bobby? You don't have to show it to us in detail, but that shows tell us what you're doing now and why leadership is so crucial to what you're doing now.
Well, I think as I left the Giants and looked at what was next, I think my focus had stayed on baseball, and then as COVID approached us and sort of interrupted our, a little bit of interrupted baseball, also interrupted some of my conversations. I realized that what I really wanted to do, no matter what, hopefully in baseball, but also maybe other avenues, was just to continue to invest in people. And in many ways, when the owner of this company, it's called Home Preservation, and they're a licensed contractor in the Bay Area, when he approached me about coming to run his company, he said he really needed somebody who knew how to manage people and build a team. And in the construction business, particularly in our business, he had a lot of people, but he didn't feel like that they always worked together as a team. And he outlined for me just building the team so that they're pulling together, and there's a common goal, and they can accomplish endless things if they work together. And so, one of the books that I had, or writers I had become very passionate about during the end of my tenure with the Giants, was Pat Lencioni, Bay Area guy and a great writer of business books. In fact, he has a unique writing style. I think he went to college. He wanted to be a screenwriter, or just a write creative elements for Broadway, perhaps, or something. And his dad said, no, you need to study business. So sure enough, he studied business. But then the first time came along where he could write a business book, he wrote it like a screenplay. And it reads like a story, but it gives you all these elements of business, which is, really makes it for an easy read, but you can also pick up on all the things that he's trying to teach. And Pat Lencioni writes a book called The Ideal Team Player. And he talks about how, the ideal team player is humble, hungry, and smart, meaning people smart. and and if any one of those is out of balance, it can affect the team. So if you have a team player that's hungry and humble, but they're not people smart, invariably you as a leader, you have to go behind them all the time and clean up their messes because they said the wrong thing or interpreted a meeting or conversation the wrong way. And so you've got to clean it up a lot. And we're all really good at one of those and pretty good at the other. And the other we probably have to develop and struggle with a little bit. But I look at one of the things I really enjoy about um, seeing people, be team players is, something that Steve Kerr told me, which is how important it is to have players that have a compassion or tolerance for each other, because there's no doubt we have to have a level of understanding of where other people are coming from, and we're not always going to agree on how others do their work, but if we can at least have a compassion or tolerance for them. We can't have pitchers on the mound every time an infielder makes a mistake, raising his hands, looking back at him. You that's not professional, but it's also bad for the team element. But that's true in the construction industry too. When a guy puts on a board sideways and you have to go back and pull it off and reinsert it, you can't have the foreman throwing up his hands. You got to make sure you learn from your mistakes and you get it right the next time. But but as Steve Kerr said, we have to have a certain amount of tolerance and compassion for each other so that we have to keep pulling on the same rope, and we can't turn on each other. When you turn on each other, it turns team chemistry and change results. So I think it's really all about building teams.
So you've brought up so much wisdom, and I could go in so many different directions. And you mentioned Steve Kerr. We study him in the classes that I teach as part of my workshop programs. To your exact point, he has 4 principles: competitiveness, compassion, joy, and mindfulness. So we all know what we think of Steve Kerr, right? My goodness, he just won gold in the Paris Olympics this summer. But Bobby, what I want to ask you, which is fascinating to me, is that you're leading at the highest level in your industry now, which is construction, right? You're the CEO of home preservation, and then you were the general manager, SVP of baseball for the San Francisco Giants, 25 years of a rich career there. People are people. However, I will ask you the nuances and the differences that you've observed in yourself in leading in baseball and leading in now what you're doing.
Well, the nuances are plentiful. I mean, I think that there when you're dealing with people, there's people who have expectations. I mean, I think when in baseball you're looking some oftentimes the most, we always think about fan expectations, but oftentimes for me in baseball, my biggest concern of expectations were what a free agent expected in free agency financially, or in terms of years, or in terms of role. Oftentimes managers have to deal with the players' expectations, in terms of where they'll be in the lineup, or how much they'll play, or what role they'll have, whether it be in the bullpen or the starting role, or how long they'll pitch in that game, or how long how long before they get come out, how many pitches will they throw. You're always battling expectations, and I think that's very true in construction. Now the difference is you have homeowners who have expectations of how long is this job going to take, how much is it going to cost, and so expectations are always at play, and so I think that's what we deal with.
Well said. All right, Bobby, we're going to do an all-star round. First thought, best thought, okay? And then we'll call it a day. Here we go. You
Got it.
ready?
Got it.
All
Yeah.
right. Here we go. What was your favorite moment from the 3 championships, 10, 12, and 14? Singular moment.
When Madison Bumgarner started walking out of the bullpen in Kansas City.
Of the new baseball rules, what is your favorite?
I like the pitch clock.
Okay.
I will say that I like the runner at second base as a fan in extra innings, but I think as an executive it would drive me nuts. I don't think I would like it as an executive, but as a fan, it's fun to watch.
Favorite Brian Sabian moment of all time?
2010, last out, Brian Wilson, in Texas, World Series. We're in Bochy's office in Arlington, Texas, and we see the screen, we see the last out. Brian sits down, he puts his head in his hands, and his boys come behind him, and I just see the release of all of that years of experience in one moment. It was pretty special.
Favorite Bruce Bochy moment?
2012, when we win the World Series, I worked with some people behind the scenes to make sure that he took that trophy into the clubhouse in 2012 after we won. Because in 2010, he didn't get to touch the trophy literally sometime until later in the celebration, because it got presented and he never had a chance to bring it into the clubhouse. So 2012, when he brought that trophy into the clubhouse and the players went nuts, I was like, that's the way it should be. That was nice.
Nice. Okay, of all the teams you prepared and played against, the Giants, right? Which one did you always know would be most prepared and very tough on the field?
Miami Marlins. Mike Hill ran a tight ship. He was smart. He was, even in trade talks, he could call you back in an hour and let you know what he needed in a trade. But it was the same with his club. They were always prepared. They were tough to beat. And there was some of that element in San Diego under Kevin Towers, of course, too. But Marlins, stood out to me for sure.
Last one. What advice would you give somebody considering a life and a career? And I say life because we do work a lot of hours in professional sports in baseball.
Don't take no for an answer. Don't take no for an answer. Keep persevering, keep pursuing, keep pushing. Get experience, but look for opportunities. Spend more time looking for opportunities than looking for people. And when you got to find an opportunity, and then pursue people to help you get that opportunity. But don't focus on finding people. Networking is great, but ultimately, the best network in the world isn't any good if you don't have a job to pursue. So find a job that you want and go after it.
Fantastic. Bobby, I'm going to close it by saying this. You and I both alluded to Steve Kerr earlier, and one of his values, his leadership principles, is joy. As I get older, I have not lost any joy for interacting with people like you. And that's from the heart. And I'm not going to hide it. And I just really appreciate you for a variety of reasons. And one of them is coming on this podcast and sharing your wisdom. Thank you very, very much.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Chris. It's just been fun to see you. It's been too long.
It really has. And we thank Bobby very much for being on the show. I have 3 takeaways from the conversation. Bobby referenced author Pat Lencioni, right, from the book, The Ideal Team Player. 3 elements to get folks thinking and working together properly: being humble, being hungry, and being people smart. And when one of those are out of balance, the leader has to do work to bring them back into balance. I thought that part was fascinating from our conversation. Number 2, when running an organization like a baseball franchise, having everyone be in sync, from the baseball ops to baseball on the field to business ops. And everyone is important in that operation. And as Bobby said, from bat boys to players in the middle of the lineup to the business office, when all of that comes together and folks are meeting and understanding each other's goals and objectives, you can win and have sustained success on the field and off, reflected in sellouts and, of course, championships. And it takes work to bring everyone together. And my final takeaway is the parallels that Bobby had between understanding people in his business now at Home Preservations, the licensing contractor company where he is the CEO, and his role as senior vice president and general manager of the San Francisco Giants. People are people. They just have different issues within their given industry. And Bobby made that very clear. It's all about communicating clearly to the stakeholders, communicating clearly to the fans and or the folks that are working with you, the clients, the home buyers, etc. Understanding our messaging and understanding the industry and the people that are within that endeavor. A wonderful conversation. I hope you agree. And thank you very much, everybody, for being part of Keep the Line Moving, episode 100. Please remember to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, or recommend the podcast. We appreciate it very much. We'll see you next time, everybody. Have a great week on Keep the Line Moving. Every week, you hear guests on this podcast talk about some of their biggest leadership challenges. As a leader, you want to make an impact on those you lead and reach your organization's goals, while also optimizing your time management. Wherever you are in your leadership journey, we could all use some help. This is what we focus on with our group and individual coaching services. To book a call or get more information, email me directly at chrisg@garganoleadership.com or visit our website at garganoleadership.com. For our podcast and video producer, Jack Radutsky, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal, have a great week, everybody.